Back in 2019, I reviewed the original Rode PodMic, and at the time, I really liked it. There weren't a lot of inexpensive broadcast-style dynamic microphones back then, but fast forward to today, and there are a lot of options in this category, and the original Rode PodMic can sound a little dull compared to some of those newer microphones. However, Rode did do a great job with the processing with the Rode PodMic when it came to pairing it with the $600 to $700 Rodecaster Pro. Now, as of May 2023, one of the newest microphones to the broadcast-style market is the Rode PodMic USB. You might think that since USB is in the name that it is exclusively a USB mic, but this is actually not the case. It's a hybrid XLR USB mic. So here steps in the $200 new Rode PodMic USB, where you can just literally plug it into your computer and get a very similar processed sound to when you would plug the original PodMic into the Rodecaster Pro. Now, when I say the original Rode PodMic sounds dull without processing, which I am using that microphone right now, Rode actually did make a really good point for that. They said they designed the original Rode PodMic to be very versatile, to sound good on a lot of different voices. And that does make sense, but there is no denying that it does sound a lot more flattering when the Rodecaster Pro processing is on, like I'll engage right now. But now you are listening to the original Rode PodMic plugged into the Rodecaster Pro 2 with the PodMic profile turned on, and now you're listening to the new Rode PodMic USB with the windscreen on that comes with it, going into Rode Connect into my computer with the processing on. And I just wanted to give you a quick comparison of these microphones, show you how they sound against each other with the processing on. And now here is with no processing on the original Rode PodMic and the Rode PodMic USB. And as you can hear right now, they do sound slightly different. And just to be as thorough as possible, here's a quick comparison with no processing on each of them without the windscreen on the new Rode PodMic USB. And I did want to let you know that I am going to include a link in the description for a more extensive comparison, including microphones like the Rode XDM100, the Shure MV7, and some other microphones. Now to focus more on the present rather than the past here. Now, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the PodMic USB does come with a new stylish windscreen. No non-designed foam blobs here. Rode did tell me they aren't planning on selling this foam windscreen separately, so if you were thinking about buying it for the OG Rode PodMic, as cooler people than I would call it, unfortunately, this windscreen only comes with this microphone. But this windscreen actually does sit slightly off of the grill of the microphone to help curb plosives even more. The PodMic USB does also come with a very nice USB-C to USB-C cable, and the microphone itself build quality is just as good as the previous PodMic. And speaking of that great build, it does come with the exact same yoke mount, which is also nice that it has the threading on the bottom where you can mount it to either a 3/8 or 5/8 inch thread mount. But as you can see, it has a really cool all-black design with gold accents now. Now, one of the gold accents is actually on the back of the microphone. This is the headphone volume control as well as a mute button. And underneath that is where you will see your inputs and outputs. To the left, you'll have your 3.5mm headphone jack. In the middle is your XLR connection. And then on the right is the USB-C port. And next to that USB-C port is a little indicator light that will be green when you are connected, and it will turn red if you do mute the microphone. Now, for people that plan on using this only as a USB microphone, this actually does come with a little XLR cover as well. And as a USB microphone, this is capable of 24-bit at 48 kHz. It has a digital equivalent noise level of 19 dBA and an analog equivalent noise of 26 dBA. This is an end-address dynamic microphone with a cardioid polar pattern, a frequency range of 20 Hz to 20 kHz, an output impedance of 460 ohms, XLR, a max SPL of 148 decibels, and a sensitivity of -57 decibels. But when it comes to microphones, we all have different voices and different expectations, different ears. We all like different things. I mean, some of us even talk, 3 feet from the microphone, while others just get right up on the microphone. We just eat this microphone, and it's yum yum. Where I'm not literally going to eat it, but you know what I mean. And maybe I don't like the taste of foam, so I get that foam windscreen out of the way so I can num on the microphone. Or maybe I want to get 3 feet away without the microphone windscreen on. Here's how that sounds. And a lot of other people, push out their P's really aggressively. They're like, hey, waiter, can I get some pickled peanutses over here? Pickled peanutses for me, please. Hey, sir, can I get another order of pickled peanutses while I talk into this microphone without the windscreen on? Pickled peanutses. Did you get that? Pickled peanutses. Yeah. But if you are ordering pickled peanutses, you probably shouldn't talk directly into the microphone. Have it angled slightly. Don't have it angled too much, because that obviously changes the tone a lot. Now, one other thing that's very important with microphones is the polar pattern. If you are going to be talking in a room with another person, you're going to want to aim the least sensitive part of the microphone toward them, and then obviously the most sensitive part toward you, toward your mouth hole. I mean, even some kooky kids type on keyboards while they're talking into their microphone. Wild. Now, cardioid microphones like this are, of course, most sensitive directly in the front and least sensitive directly in the back. But one way I like to discover how a polar pattern is and how much it rejects a sound is by doing a white noise test. Let's try it. Now, one test we absolutely cannot live without is a kitty purr test. Now, microphones that come with windscreens, I always wonder how much that windscreen affects the tone of the microphone. Can you hear a massive difference now that I pulled that windscreen off? Does it sound better? Does it sound worse?
Here is a female voice test that my husband is forcing me to do. This microphone is the Rode PodMic USB, and this is with the windscreen on. Now, this is with the DSP enabled in the Rode Connect software. Here is the final test. This is without DSP and without the windscreen. I hope you enjoyed this rare female voice test.
Now I have the Rode PodMic USB in a completely untreated room, very reverberant room. So now I have the compressor, the oral exciter, and the big bottom enabled with that DSP, and you can tell there is a sound difference now. So I just went back into Rode Reporter after I enabled those settings, and here we are with some DSP. I'm very excited that Rode Central is available on the phone now. I think that's going to be really nice. And hopefully they just add more and more functionality to that Central app. Now we have that noise gate enabled. Usually I don't mess around with the noise gate too much on the PodMic, but this is a good noise gate test anyway. I left the settings how they usually are, so I'm not sure if it's going to be good or bad. I'm assuming it's not going to be amazing. Now we have the noise gate back off, and here's how that sounds. But one thing I do want to make you aware of is that the guitar tests that I do in this video, they were actually recorded directly into my iPad Pro using the new version of Logic Pro X. So if you have an iPad Pro, just know that this microphone will work flawlessly with it. Now I know that this is primarily meant for spoken word and podcasting. I mean, pod is literally in the name, but I think trying all sorts of microphones in different ways that they aren't necessarily meant for is fun. I mean, a lot of microphones have been found out to sound really good for music that were meant for broadcast and vice versa. So out of curiosity, I will do some guitar tests with this. Now to give you my opinion on the Rode PodMic USB, I will say that Rode's last release, all of the products I felt like were overpriced when I initially saw them. And recently I did an initial impression / overview of the Streamer X, and with that product I felt like it was overpriced, and with the PodMic USB, I felt like it was about $50 overpriced. But now that I've tried it out a little bit longer, became a little bit more acquainted with it, and figured out where it fits in the market, I realized that it's really not a bad deal, and one of the things that helped me realize that was the Shure MV7 still being about $50 more than the PodMic USB. I do think the PodMic USB would just dominate at $170. Would I like the price lower? Sure, I guess who wouldn't? But I don't think it necessarily is a deal breaker being at $200. Now, a couple things that I do want to mention that maybe other people aren't aware of and maybe are deal breakers for them is that actually with the PodMic USB, you cannot use the XLR and USB port at the same time. Every time I would have this plugged into the Rodecaster Pro and then I would plug it into my computer, the USB would just take over and it would completely shut down the XLR. And I was a little bit bummed about that because for me in particular, even though it's probably overkill for most people, I would sometimes use XLR and USB. I would use the DSP processing with the USB connection, and then I would just have a clean recording going to, an interface or a recorder like a Zoom. And it was always nice just having that safety net. Now, one other thing to be aware of is that with the Rodecaster Pro 2, you actually do have an EQ and a de-esser in the processing area for the PodMic profile that you actually don't have with the Rode PodMic USB when you're using it with Rode Connect. Now for me, none of the things that I just mentioned are deal breakers, but the fact that this microphone sounds better, looks cooler, comes with an amazing windscreen, and is way more versatile than the original Rode PodMic are the big notes to take away. Those are definitely more important than the nitpicky things that I mentioned earlier, but those few things could be a big deal to some people. Now, one other thing that I do want to mention is that I didn't see a settings profile for the PodMic within Rode Connect, so I actually put these settings up on the screen right now if you want to copy those as kind of a starting point. Personally, I think you should adjust the processing, adjust the settings to your own voice, but if you want to screenshot these and copy them down as kind of the standard Rode PodMic settings, then you can just build off of that. Overall, I'm happy with this addition to the Rode PodMic family. I think that this microphone came out really well. It actually exceeded my expectations, and the BBSAR rating that I give the Rode PodMic USB is an 8.5. I do want to give a big thank you to Rode for sending me the PodMic USB to try out. They just wanted me to give it an honest review. I was not obligated to say anything about it. This video was not sponsored. But another big thank you to everyone that subscribes to the Audio Hotline, and the biggest thank you to all of the lovely members of the Audio Hotline. If you are an Audio Hotline member, you are the best person in the world, and I am going to start doing a monthly members podcast. But once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you audio nerds next time.